hosting a Zoom meeting at the same time as being a Dharma teacher is something to get used to. I'm not so nervous as I was when I first started, although I'm still learning. And very glad to be learning. It's a very useful skill to be able to talk to 20 people from as far afield as, well, Nigel is in the island of Mull, for example. And we've got people joining us from southern England, and sometimes we will drop in from other countries as well. Anyway, welcome to Dharma. I'm here on a beautiful spring sunny morning at Dharma on the 6th of May 2020 during the coronavirus pandemic. I'm saying that because this talk might be watched on YouTube in years to come, and people need to know the context of the time that we're all living in. And it's become a bit of a feature on these weekly broadcasts to show you the cherry tree outside the window. So I've actually got the computer set up so I can just kind of like pan across like that. And then you can see the cherry tree. There it is. And that's down there, that's the, where are we now? Yeah, there is the Dharma Shrine Room. You might recognize that. And this is the link that links into the retreat center, which is just here. And this is the magnificent cherry tree as it looks now. You can see it's in all her glory. She's really come out, and there's the spring sunshine shining on it. So we've been watching this tree week by week for 5 or 6 weeks now, and it's been very slowly coming into bud, and here it is in its splendor. So I didn't want to miss that. You can, but on the other hand, as you can see, if I just show it you all the time, then I'm a sort of silhouette and you can't see me. So I'm going to turn the laptop back over here like that, and then I come back into view. And you can also see the Buddha image, which is a key part of my talk today. So what am I going to be talking about today? Well, when Buddhist teachers give talks, they kind of keep on harping on the same thing over and over again, really. Things like, you know, the reality of impermanence and the potential for peace in the midst of that. Not just peace, but boundless compassion, profound wisdom, and ineffable fulfillment, even in the midst of impermanence with old age, sickness, and death all around, because that is the reality of the human condition. So Buddhist teachers are always going on about things like this, because our great elder, the founder of the whole lineage, he used to talk about it over and over and over and over again. He used to really emphasize these very simple truths. And although his teachings have been elaborated into what's now thousands and thousands of books and millions of words, the essentials of it are still the same as they always were when he first started teaching 25 centuries ago. As he summed up in the very last sentence he uttered, all conditioned things are impermanent. With mindfulness, strive. And he implied with mindfulness, strive in your Dharma practice. Because that, even in the midst of impermanence, will see you through to the place of peace, the island of refuge, the sanctuary. And that's really what my talk is about today. It's about, in the midst of impermanence, finding peace. And not just for your own sake, but so that you can be there for others who are panicking in the midst of, Because as we all know, it's so easy in the midst of impermanence to panic. And that's the kind of instinctive kind of reaction. When you perceive disease and death, it triggers your fear. And we all have kind of a whole fear mechanism built into our bodies, so that it's so easy to go into fear. But fear, if it takes you over, causes you to contract into a kind of ruthless selfishness. And then you don't make wise choices. And you especially don't make boundlessly compassionate choices. They tend to be very selfish and narrow-minded. And this is why, this was true 25 centuries ago when the Buddha was a young man, a prince. Even though he was born into a very wealthy family and he had everything that the material world could provide, social status, he was the equivalent of a millionaire in the ancient Indian days. Everything he could wish for, and yet he could see that none of that could insulate him from old age, sickness, and death. And many of you probably know the legend of how the Buddha came to leave home as a young man, how he went out into the city and beheld 4 sights, one after the other. The first sight he saw was a very old man. And the second sight he saw was somebody who was terminally ill. And the third sight he saw was a corpse. And then the fourth sight he saw was somebody who had dedicated their life to the pursuit of the place of peace in the midst of impermanence. The way of regaining your confidence and courage and strength, even in the midst of death and disease. So this is what sharpened his mind as a young prince and focused his mind. This awareness of death and disease focused his mind and gave him a sense of urgency that although he was young now and healthy now, he wouldn't always be, and he wanted to use his time very prudently and carefully so that he could find the place of peace in the midst of life and death all around. And this is what motivated him to go forth. So the awareness of old age, sickness, and death, in the end, was stimulated him to not waste any more time, but make a priority of training in finding the place of peace, so that he could be there for others and help them find the place of peace in the midst of impermanence too. And he was particularly inspired when he beheld the sight of somebody who had realized this and dedicated their life, changed their whole life around in order to make a priority of practice, going for refuge to the place of peace. When he saw a holy man, in other words, he just thought, I want to be one of those. I want to be a holy man. And so he set off, and thankfully, thanks to that realization that he had 25 centuries ago, he dedicated himself wholeheartedly to that, his practice. And only a few years later, he broke through into Bodhi, which means the state of being a Buddha. And the rest is history. The rest is 25 years of a flourishing global religion, which is still thriving to this day, like that cherry tree out there, and is still bestowing its fruits and flowers and seeds and riches upon all who want to come and listen. So I think the lesson for us is, at a time when old age, sickness and death are all around us very obviously, if we can recognize that that is there, and that the only way of being at peace with that is through a path of mind training, systematic mind training, and that you want to deepen and develop that mind training so that you can be at peace in the midst of impermanence, then maybe it will spur you to really seize the day and take the precious opportunity of practicing and training so that you can become more and more and more, or at least more of the time, peaceful and confident and open-hearted and wise and compassionate, even in the midst of the awareness of death and disease. During the pandemic, it's a bit like everybody has got the four sights, or at least three of the four sights, in their face all the time, day after day, 7 days a week, even on a Sunday. Even on a Sunday, you know, the politicians are making announcements about how to deal with this life-threatening pandemic. Even on a Sunday, there's no getting away from it for anybody, you know. And actually, there could be people who, during the pandemic, this has the effect on their minds that the four sights had on the mind of young Prince Siddhartha. And it really kind of finally gets through to them that this is the priority. This is more important than anything else. More important than your pension plan, or how big your house is, or what kind of car you've got, or what kind of smartphone you've got, or anything like that. That's all totally trivial compared to this. In the face of old age, sickness and death, the only thing that really counts in terms of happiness is the mind training that enables you to find the place of peace in the midst of old age, sickness and death. It doesn't matter, you know, about all these other things, that most of the time when there isn't a pandemic, like probably most of the human race gets obsessed by trivia, things that don't really matter, things that they can't take with them when they die, you know, for example. But during the pandemic, it's like three of the four sights are in everyone's face. And when the pandemic happened and the lockdown happened, I pretty much decided that I would try and provide the fourth sight, partly by making myself visible so you could see me. I am one of those people who's dedicated himself to finding the place of peace as the priority, but also talking about how to practice, how to train the mind to realize it for yourself. So I realized when the lockdown happened, this is an incredible opportunity for humankind all over the world, because three of the four sites are going to be there 7 days a week for months on end. So if we could just have a full sight, so many people during this lockdown might break through into really effective going for refuge to the Dharma. When I say effective going for refuge to the Dharma, it means recognizing that the Dharma is the only way of solving the problem of fear. So when you're scared, you look for a refuge, don't you? I mean, rabbits do it, mice do it, and people do it. When they're scared, they look for a refuge. They're desperate to find somewhere safe to go. And one of the brilliant kind of things that the Buddha came up with in his teaching is to say, yes, you're looking for a refuge, but you won't find a refuge from fear just by traveling to a beautiful, peaceful place in the country. You'll only find a refuge from fear by learning to practice and then relying on your own practice that works with your inner mental state of fear and transforms it into a mental state of peace. So that the problem of fear has to be traced right back to the root, which is right here. It's inside. Fear is something that's happening inside you. So although fear makes you kind of look around and see danger everywhere and then try and run away from it, even if you run away from danger, you can't run away from fear unless you can trace it back to the source and work on it as the mental, physical, bodily, mental state that it is, and then train yourself to find peace. When you find peace, even in the midst of crisis, then even safety isn't really an issue anymore because you're not scared. So that's what's meant by the place of peace. It's not, obviously, it's not a geographical location. That's just a metaphor. But it's a way of being, which is being peace. One of Thich Nhat Hanh's books was called Being Peace. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. In the midst of the pandemic, when 3 of the 4 sites are on every news broadcast, people talking about sickness all the time, people talking about the danger of death all the time, and people talking a lot about aging as well, because of course, as we get older, we've got more chance of getting sick and dying, and that is not true now, and it always has been true. It was true when the Buddha was alive too. And these are on all of the news broadcasts. It's in our face all the time. So that's why I started these weekly broadcasts, to provide the full sight and also to help people to recognize this and see the opportunity to practice the Dharma, seize the day and get on with the training without wasting time, because every day counts. It has always been true, but it's so much more obvious now. You don't know how long you've got. Nobody does. I think the awareness of the fragility of and the impermanence of human life and health is particularly obvious just now. And you can either, that can send you into a panic and you just get into a whirl of obsessive compulsive behavior like Twittering or Facebooking or whatever else you might be doing, obsessively listening to news broadcasts and thereby frittering away the precious minutes and days of your time. Or you could use that time to practice the Dharma and steer your way through to the place of peace. Every Sunday morning also, since the coronavirus pandemic really hit, the Smritiratna Buddhist order has a meditation, and hundreds of us all over the world sit down at 7:30 on a Sunday morning and we practice meditation together. And it's a practice called the bodhicitta practice. It's a practice to it's an insight meditation practice, but it's also a practice of compassion in which you contemplate the human condition, the sort of thing I've just been talking about, and also contemplate suffering, and then arouse in yourself a very strong desire to reach out and send compassion to everyone in the world at a time of suffering. So this is what the Triratna Buddhist order have been quietly getting on with for the last 6 weeks every Sunday morning, and I've been joining in. It's actually a Zoom meeting, which sometimes is led from an order member in Australia. We've had it being led from India. We've had it being led by an order member in, let's see, Glasgow. That was another time. So different people lead it at different times. I think last Sunday it was led by somebody living on an island just off the coast of New Zealand. So we've got order members all over the world, but they're all practicing for the benefit of humankind right now, so that they can rise to the challenge and be at their best for the people. This practice helps you to turn towards what resources you and gain a sense of courage and confidence, and then turn towards suffering and suffering people without closing down, but just standing strong with an open heart, and then responding with compassion. And it's a beautiful practice. It's sometimes called the Tonglen practice, and Pema Chodron, some of you may know Pema Chodron's books. She is a great believer in this practice too, and she has a policy that every book she publishes, somewhere in the book, tells you how to practice Tonglen. And she has a whole scale of different grades of practice of Tonglen. The kind of practice we're doing in the order is pretty hardcore, really. It's quite a demanding, challenging practice, but there are different versions of it. And she actually has more sort of like elementary versions, which relative beginners can sort of engage with. So if you have got a book by Pema Chodron, you'll probably find in there an instruction about how to do Tonglen practice. And these days it's very easy to discover these things. But the way we do it is a very traditional way of doing it, which is, first of all, you visualize yourself in the presence of the enlightened ones and in the presence of the teachings, which is usually visualized as a pile of Dharma scriptures, and in the presence of the Sangha, and especially the Sangha of people who are enlightened. So the glorious community of bodhisattvas and arahants and enlightened beings. So you imagine yourself in the presence of the enlightened ones. So the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, not just as a symbol, like this symbol on my case here, but as a sort of living experience of being in the presence. You imagine yourself in the presence of living beings who are enlightened. That has a very heartening effect. On that very first bodhicitta practice, when the order conveners first came up with the idea and they invited all order members to join in, the assistant to the order conveners, a Dharmacharani in Sheffield called Vimalamati, she was the one who worded that initial invitation. And when I read the invitation, I was really struck by her turn of phrase. It's really beautiful. I'd like to quote something from what she said. So this is Vimalamati's words. In this time of great world affliction, the elements of this practice ring the bell of truth on our human condition and call on the power of the true refugees. In this time of great world affliction, the elements of this practice ring the bell of truth on our human condition and call on the power of the true refugees. So thank you, Vimalamati, for wording that. And I'm going to be just keep referring to those words, so I think they really sum up what the practice is all about. So that last bit was calling on the power of the true refuges. Well, you call upon the power of the true refuges by calling them to mind. That's the first thing you do. And of course, having a picture like this that symbolizes what the enlightened mind is like an image like that. A lot of people have gravitated towards this image. This is why you can see Buddha statues in garden centers and supermarkets these days. Some of them are very ugly, but some of them are really beautiful. I rather like this one. It's my favorite. And because they just remind you that it's possible for a human being to be at peace. This is what the picture kind of looks like, somebody who's sitting at peace. And what the statues in the garden centers don't kind of really spell out is that it's possible even to be at peace in a cremation ground. The Buddha, as part of his training, used to go and sit and meditate in cremation grounds. So he used to sit in meditation posture like this, with corpses right in front of him. Not something I would advise for those of a nervous disposition, shall we say. Not at any rate until you have trained yourself to become very strong and resilient through your practice of mindfulness and ethics and metta bhavana and spiritual friendship and so on. Eventually, perhaps you'll be strong enough to do that. The Buddha had been training in that kind of way for a while, and he was very strong, and that's what he used to do. He used to sit and meditate in the cremation grounds. So it's all very well to have a Buddha statue in your garden, but to actually be like this is to be like this no matter what is going on around you. So it's not just being all nice and relaxed. It's being relaxed even in the midst of a crisis, for example, a global pandemic or a hospital ward. And there probably are, in fact, I know there are doctors and nurses who practice his teaching, and it resources them to be even in the midst of disease and death all around them. And it keeps them strong and confident and sustainable, really. How to be sustainable at a time of crisis. The Buddha exemplified it. So when I see a picture of the Buddha, it calls to mind those qualities of confidence even in the midst of danger. And by calling them to mind, they call them to heart. They call them to heart-mind. When they're called to heart-mind, they kind of call them forth from within. So when you remember how the Buddha stayed courageous and wise and compassionate, even in the midst of a crisis, it somehow calls that latent potential out from within you to become as courageous and wise and kind as you can be, at your best, even in a crisis, even in a time of danger. So this is what's meant by when Vimalamati says it calls on the power of the true refuges. The power of the true refuges in the ultimate sense is an inner power. The true refuges are no use to you if they just remain as a pretty statue in a garden center. You have to embody them and become them. In the end, you yourself have to become enlightened. It's no good if the refuges, they're no use to you as refuges if they just remain out there somewhere. So to call on the power of the true refuges is to Align yourself with them as a way of empowering yourself to be like them. Ultimately, therefore, you call on the power of the true refugees by empowering yourself in relation to the refugees to be like them. And the three refugees are Buddha mind, the beautiful potential of every human being to attain the place of peace. That potential is Buddha, Buddhahood. That's this gold and yellow jewel here. And then the second of the three refuges is the Dharma jewel, which is always depicted as a sort of deep sky blue, like the deep sky blue in the tropics, which represents reality and all of the reality practices that help you to make your peace with reality. The reality of impermanence, for example. And then the Sangha jewel, the Sangha refuge is this one here, the red jewel, which of course is the color of love, the color of compassion. So these three refuges, which is the insignia on the kesa of every order member, these are the three refuges, Smritiratna, also referred to as Smritiratna, the three most precious things, the three jewels. And it's because, particularly in this particular practice community, Triratna Buddhist community, recognizing that simple truth as the heart of the Buddha's teaching, that what really makes a difference is where you turn when you're scared and feel insecure. That makes all the difference. It determines what your life will be like and what sort of person you will become. Where you turn when you feel scared and insecure. And Sangharakshita, who founded the Triratna Buddhist order, really made a priority of just going on about this teaching over and over and over again, putting it in the heart of his whole teaching, really. Really highlighting, I mean, the Buddha talked about it. It's there in chapter 14 of the Dhammapada, if you want to go look it up, by the way. Many people out of fear flee for refuge to sacred hills, trees, groves, and shrines. In reality, this is not the best refuge. In reality, this is not a safe refuge. This will not, I can't remember the rest of it word for word, but it's something to do with this will not solve the problem of life and death. Only the Four Noble Truths, only training with the Sangha will guide you towards the path of peace. So that's right there in one of the Buddha's earliest teachings in chapter 14 of the Dhammapada. And I'm very proud to be part of this Triratna Buddhist order, founded by Sangharakshita, to whom I'm profoundly grateful for founding it just over 50 years ago, and without whom I would never have become the person that I am. I would never have been sitting here. Dharma Kosha wouldn't exist. I wouldn't have even the courage to even think of giving a live talk broadcast to lots of people and then uploaded to Zoom for hundreds of people to see. I mean, it's quite a scary thing to do. Last night I was feeling quite anxious about it. I had to distract myself by reading my historical novel to take my mind off it to get to sleep last night. It's not easy to do this. I'm not saying this just to boast. I'm saying that I couldn't do this without the Buddhist community. I feel profoundly grateful for this beautiful movement that Sangharakshita founded and the simple truths that he recognized in the Buddhist teaching and then really clarified for the benefit of people like me so that I could become the sort of person that I have become, so that I can do this kind of thing. And you can do this kind of thing too one day. You can do things that demand quite a lot of bravery, even in the midst of scary kind of times. You can regain your mindfulness, you can regain your peace and confidence, and you can be at your best for the sake of others who turn towards you because they're panicking and they're looking for somebody who still seems peaceful in the midst of a crisis. You can be like that too, like this. We all can. That's the whole point of the Buddhist tradition. So I just wanted to come back to just explaining this bodhicitta practice, which Smritiratna Buddhist order members are doing every Sunday morning, and we've been doing it for the last 6 weeks. And as Vimalamati said, the practice is that you first start by calling on the power of the true refuges. And you do that by calling them to mind. And then a particularly potent way of doing it is that you imagine yourselves in their living presence. And if you have a shrine at home, you may already be doing this. So at home, I've got a shrine. And every morning before I sit down to meditation, I bow to the Buddha. And then I sit down and then I imagine that I'm in his living presence. And then I talk to him and I say the sort of things that I would say if I really was in his living presence. And by doing that, it really heightens the imaginative sense of the vividness of the experience. So that by the time I finish my devotional practice, emotionally, I feel as if I'm meditating in the presence of the Buddha. Not as somebody who died 25 centuries ago, but he's right here in front of me. We're sort of breathing together and we're aware of each other. Now that is a particularly potent way of calling Buddhahood to mind. It feels like a living reality and it's very, very heartening, encouraging. But once I've done that, then my practice always goes well because I feel it is sort of empowered. Yeah, empowered. I feel empowered. I feel empowered by the true refuges, the Buddha who embodies the Dharma, and the Dharma itself, which is the ultimate refuge, and the Sangha, which is the community of fellow practitioners. And personally, I've made incredible, the last few weeks I've been doing this every Sunday morning practice. I've had some very significant breakthroughs in my spiritual life, in my whole emotional life. Thanks to a sense of solidarity with my brothers and sisters across the world who are practicing at the same time as I am. There's one particular time about 2 or 3 weeks ago when my own preceptor, Subhuti, a man who I deeply honor and look up to, was leading the meditation. And it was probably the strongest devotional experience I've ever had in my life, a sense of heart connection with my personal teacher, my personal preceptor, Subhuti. And I had his photograph on the shrine, and he was it's a very realistic photograph. I just downloaded it from the internet one day, it's up there, but it's like, I look at that photograph as if he's actually looking back at me, and it just reminds me of our heart connection, which is a real thing. He ordained me 29 years ago, and it'll be the 29th anniversary on the 30th of May, that's right. So he ordained me 29 years ago, and he encourages me. He is part of my Sangha refuge. My going for refuge to the Sangha is to gain courage by aligning myself with members of the Sangha that inspire me. I look at Subhuti, and to me, he is a living example of courageous love and wisdom. He doesn't claim to be enlightened, he's not a Buddha, but he's on the way. and he's further along than me, and that's all that matters. I look at him and I feel cheered up and encouraged and delighted and emboldened. So of course it's bringing out that courage in me. So this is on my personal shrine at home. I have an image of the Buddha, and I say to the Buddha, Buddha Shakyamuni, you are the founding father of this, my true lineage. I am descended from you. I sit at your feet. I honor you. The Buddha you became, the Dharma you discovered and shared, the Sangha you practiced. Sorry, the Sangha you nurtured, you founded and nurtured. The Sangha to which I now belong. Through this Dada Rinpoche, Sangharakshita, Subhuti branch of the noble family. So I'm kind of reaffirming my lineage, my heart connection, which is through my teachers. I'm connected through to the Buddha. And on my shrine, I've got a photograph of Subhuti, my preceptor, and his preceptor, Sangharakshita, and his preceptor, Dada Rinpoche, that I met in India 33 years ago. A beautiful embodiment of the Bodhisattva ideal. And they open my heart and they embolden me. They call to mind the power of the refugees by empowering me, in other words. And also on my shrine, I've got a picture of Thich Nhat Hanh. I find him a very inspiring person as well, practitioner. And also Joanna Macy, likewise. I was talking about her a couple of weeks back. And they're just two representatives of the hundreds and thousands and hundreds of thousands of wonderfully courageous, compassionate, wise men and women who have been practicing the Buddha's teaching for the last 25 centuries. If I included all of them on my shrine, you know, it would be, well, I wouldn't be able to see any. It'd be an enormous pile of photographs, including the Dalai Lama. He'd be in there somewhere as well. But there are so many. Now, I think that if you want to call on the power of the true refugees, it's worth just stopping and consider who inspires you. So it might be an image of the Buddha that inspires you. It might be one of the archetypal bodhisattvas like Green Tara that particularly inspires you. You might be particularly inspired by an ordinary human being you know. Maybe for some of you, it's Smritiratna, for example, who stood in for me last week. Thank you, Smritiratna. Maybe you've been on a retreat at Dharma and she was teaching you meditation and you just find her inspiring because she's not enlightened, but she's able to draw upon the power of the true refugees and do things like give public talks, which she never could 20 years ago. I'm sure she'll agree. So for you, maybe Smritiratna is somebody who inspires you. It's an image of the Sangha refuge for you. And it empowers you just by calling her to mind. Maybe having a picture of her on your shrine. Maybe after your retreat led by Smritiratna at Dharma, you know, you asked her if you could take her photograph, and she probably very modestly agreed, and then you took it home and put it on your shrine. And that's what works for you. So, but I think it's really important to know what works for you. Know what makes the difference between feeling scared about old age, sickness and death, or feeling strong and confident and courageous and able to be there for others. So you have to know yourself, get to know yourself through mindfulness, through turning towards your suffering, through your emotions, and just considering in a quiet way, well, what works for me? What inspires me? What gives me strength? So I've been talking about this practice of the order that we do every Sunday morning. We have a particular way of visualizing the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and the three jewels in that way. But I want to make this, I don't want it to be, this is what the order does, but you can't do it because you're not ordained yet. I don't want to say that. I want to say that what we're doing, the elements of what we're doing, is available to everybody. And this is what Vimalamati was saying in her invitation. The elements of this practice ring the bell of truth on our human condition and call on the power of the true refugees. The elements of this practice, in other words, the essentials of this practice, they ring the bell of truth on the human condition. The human condition is that we are embodied in impermanent bodies. We have an impermanent health. We are all aging. Eventually we will sicken, eventually we'll die. That is part of the truth of the human condition. Then the other part is that we have this extraordinary potential within us. That's part of the human condition too. And I'm trying to ring the bell of truth on the human condition in this talk by saying things like that, by reminding you of the four sights. So this is the fourth sight. And at a time when the other three sights are really obvious, they're really in our face, we need the fourth sight too, in order to seize the day and make the best use of this opportunity, just as young Siddhartha Gautama did 25 centuries ago. So consider what works for you, what inspires you, how you can call upon the power of the true refugees in a way that empowers you to practice the Dharma and start heading towards the place of peace, which is Buddhahood itself. In the form of the Bodhisattva practice that we practice in the order, I said it was quite a hardcore version. It kind of culminates in imagining yourself in the presence of all living beings around you, with your mother and all women seated to your left, and your father and all men seated to your right. And you consider, for example, all the kindnesses that your mother bestowed upon you and your father bestowed upon you. And then just contemplate those kindnesses, which has the effect of softening your heart to them. And then you remind yourself that throughout this, the traditional way of doing it, the traditional contemplation is that through the innumerable lifetimes of rebirth, you must have been mothered and fathered by so many different people. And if the number of lifetimes has been innumerable, then so many of these living beings must have been your mother and father at some point and bestowed upon you a mother's kindnesses and a father's kindnesses, which softens the heart. So that's the traditional way of doing it. It might not work for you. You might not even believe in rebirth, for all I know. But the element, the essential of it is just find a way to soften your heart to everybody. And it might help to start with your mother and your father. Maybe that's the last place you might want to start. It depends what works for you, you know. I find personally the traditional contemplation works for me when I remember my mother's kindnesses and my father's kindnesses. It softens my heart to them for a start, and then it softens my heart to everybody else. And then in the end, I'm sitting there feeling very, very kind of emboldened by meditating in solidarity with my brothers and sisters in the order, with my heart wide open. Very, very aware of old age, sickness and death, but not closing down, staying courageous and loving and open. And not just not closing down, but pouring, imaginatively pouring my compassion out to them. And then the really hardcore bit of the practice is that you recognize that their greatest suffering is their unskillfulness, akusala um, in Pali Sanskrit. So akusala means the deeds of body, speech, and mind that distance you from the place of peace. Things like dishonesty and cruelty and especially the kind of cruelty that is motivated by obsessive craving, the craving for pleasure, the craving for power. These kind of cravings can temporarily take you over, dominate you, and drive you into the most hideous acts of cruelty. And that's a universal truth for all men and women across, and it has always been true throughout history, that people have been taken over by a kind of extreme selfishness, of ruthless greed and craving and a lust for power. And in that kind of narrow-minded, obsessive, driven state, they can do some terrible things sometimes. I'm talking in extremes, aren't I, here? But acts like that are what is meant by akusala. They are acts driven by greed, hatred, and delusion. And they distance you from the place of peace. Now, the kind of poignant tragedy of the human condition is that everybody wants to be happy. And yet very few of us know how to move towards true happiness. It's such a pity. So many of us try to move to true happiness by cultivating pleasure or cultivating material security, as if that's going to get you anywhere in the face of old age, sickness, and death. But they cultivate happiness by forgetting about old age, sickness, and death, and then immersing themselves in sensual pleasures. And they think that that is the solution to unhappiness. So maybe they amass a fortune of millions of pounds, they live in a beautiful place in the country, they have luxuries all around them, and they try and forget about all their sickness and death as much of the time as possible and enjoy themselves by lots and lots of pleasant, exciting things. The sort of thing that the young prince was brought up doing 25 centuries ago, and the sort of thing millionaires still do to this day, and it doesn't work. Doesn't solve the problem of suffering. It only distances you from true happiness, actually, because all that time that you could be training the mind to find the place of peace within, you're frittering your time away on pursuing sensual pleasures and the illusion of security through amassing wealth. What a pity. What a tragic waste of human potential. The human potential to be like this. Yet this is what people do. It's such a crying shame. In the order Bodhicitta practice every Sunday morning, we recognize that people are locked up in the darkness created by their own deeds, their own selfish cruelty, for example, or their own dishonesty, or their own unkindnesses, or their own delusions. And in the darkness, they languish in confusion. So you just imagine that the light of Buddha mind is always there for everybody, streaming through the universe. But when you act unskillfully in the sort of way I'm describing, it's a bit like you're creating obstacles that block out the light. And the more you live unskillfully, the more and more light you block out, until in the end, you're living in complete darkness, like in a dungeon. And so as we say, and as we say in the Buddhist tradition, the ones who really get into this in a really sinister way, you might call them evildoers, for example. They need compassion even more than anybody. So what you do in the practice, you imagine those people and you breathe them in. You breathe in their darkness. You breathe in the darkness of all their sins right into your body, in which they are, in where they are transformed, at least that's the theory, into moonlight. And then you send the moonlight back out to illumine their darkness so they can see clearly how to act well from now on and find their way back to the light again. How to save themselves, how to save their soul, as they would say in the Christian tradition. So this is what I'm doing every Sunday. I'm breathing in the darkness of the worst kind of suffering, which is self-inflicted suffering, the suffering of unskillful action, and then breathing out moonlight to illuminate, imaginatively illuminate the suffering beings. And I'm thinking especially of the evildoers, you see, because they need the moonlight more than anybody else. It's kind of radical, isn't it, the Buddhist teaching? You know, actually sitting down on a Sunday morning and, you know, devoting yourself to shining moonlight into the hearts of evildoers worldwide. It's not something you'd kind of like normally think of if you weren't a devoted Buddhist, were you? But then would you ever think of practicing metta bhavana, you know, which culminates in taking everybody in the world into your heart, no matter what they've done? Recognizing that, yes, I know they've done maybe all sorts of awful things, but they have the jewel of Buddha mind in them. And so never giving up on them. This is the Buddha's vision. And this is something I'm trying to live out. And we in the Smritiratna Buddhist order, every Sunday, we get up early and we sit down and we practice this to call to mind the truth of the human condition, and then open our hearts and then send moonlight out to assuage people in their panic and fear. At this time, during the global crisis, your friends and relatives need you to draw upon your resources, everything you've learned about Dharma mind training. Draw upon them so that you can be at your best for them. One of the people who I asked put out a request for questions, and I only had one question, but it was a good question. I'm going to save it to the end. And the question was, during lockdown, I'm actually spending most of my time really enjoying the opportunity to live a very, very simple life. And I feel as if I'm at my best, and this is what I really want to do with my life, to just live a very, very simple, quiet, contemplative life. And yet, in our culture, you know, like, it's activity that is admired, and, you know, going out and doing things that are admired, and just living a simple contemplative life is kind of dismissed as being not really it, you know, not really living the compassionate life. What I want to say to you, you know who you are, is no, this is really important, that to actually make a priority about embodying the Dharma within by training the mind while you still have time. Seize the day and practice the Dharma, practice mindfulness, practice meditation, practice mind training. Use the lockdown to meditate not just once, but several times a day. Have like beautify your shrine, put your inspiring pictures on your shrine, get into working at your own devotional practice that works for you, because your friends and relatives need you at this time. And I think especially the grandparents among us, I'm thinking of, like, there are hundreds of grandmas who are seasoned, experienced Dharma practitioners, and grandfathers too. Your sons and daughters and grandchildren need you at this time. So rather than them phoning up poor old so-and-so who's probably lonely because they're in lockdown, they'll probably find themselves on a Zoom call to somebody who's actually feeling deeply peaceful and inspired, and actually giving them something. Because this is what you can do. If you've been practicing the Dharma and you know how to do it, you can be there for others. And especially those of us who've been practicing it for many years. I mean, I was talking to somebody who's just joined this Zoom group who's been practicing it for 30 years, for example, 3 decades. Well, I mean, you can be there for your grandchildren and your children and your friends because you have discovered the Dharma. So to whatever extent you can, if you can find the peace within, even in the midst of impermanence, then you can say a few things to help them find peace. They may be frontline workers who have to go into that hospital ward. So if you could just say a few things to encourage them, to empower them, then you are serving in a very, very significant way. So the contemplatives amongst us who make a priority of living a simple life and staying at home and really deepening their practice, do not undervalue yourself. The Buddha was also contemplative. Don't forget that. So that's all I have to say today. Seize the day. Cherish the Dharma. Live the Dharma. And become the ultimate refuge by embodying the Dharma.